Hello, world. Welcome back to After the Break. Today's guest is the creator and host of Scary to Remarry, none other than Mr. Shon. Welcome to After the Break.
How you doing, man? Thanks again, J. Paul, for inviting me. It's definitely an opportunity and a blessing, man, to be on your platform. Thank you.
Hey, man, thank you for being with me, sharing this great information. Your topics vary broadly from talking to men about insecurities, the Superman complex, the threat of modern fatherhood, being one person at a time, where do we go wrong, getting some of the same results, low self-esteem, things you need to hear, the reason second marriages fail, why men leave their families, the dating pool, men and their access to women. And why do you think it's so hard for men and women to actually choose a mate so that they can function in the divine order of love?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of it has to do with us not knowing who we are. Mm-hmm. I think that plays a huge part. And you have to know who you are, not what social media says, but who the creator says. And I'm a believer, so I take a Christian perspective. But a lot of people, they get into these dating pools thinking that they can have access to any man or woman. Now, you can shoot your shot, but that doesn't mean you're going to score, right? So a lot of times we have to be honest enough with ourselves to say, I am a healed and healthy man. I am aware of my triggers. Here's my faults. Here's my strong suits, and be able to tell that to someone and let them know that this is me as a complete person. This is who I am, or at least this is where I am right now. I think that's important because a lot of times we marry people based on, today, but you might be a different person a couple of years from now. And so, and I guess I'm kind of getting into marriage talk, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but a lot of times when we're married, we constantly evolving and changing. And the problem with a lot of divorces is we aren't in the same motorcycle together. TD Jakes kind of talk about like the turn. Like if I turn this motorcycle when you on the back, a lot of times people fall off because they like, you're not who you were 5 years ago. And I wasn't aware enough to pay attention to you and the changes that's needed to sustain this marriage. So a lot of times I think people, man, they just don't know who they are. And you have to be honest with yourself. And I would say this too, and I know that's not popular, but you got to date inside your league.
Date inside your league. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that, man? Because what you just said, a lot of people and some, I'd say, new believers or people who are cultural believers in a way, or traditional believers, they'd say that that's somewhat superficial.
Right. I mean, it could be superficial. I agree. There's a lot of things that's superficial. I mean, men, people say we're superficial for saying that I want this woman who's a 10, and people are like, you don't even know her. Yeah, but she's fine. So is that superficial? Yeah. So I just think, again, you have to know yourself enough, because I believe we date according to our confidence level.
You spoke on your podcast, Scary to Remarry, about being prepared as a man to lead. What do you have to say to that as far as men demanding respect or feel they deserve respect without putting in the work or the 10,000 hours, like you mentioned on one of your episodes, reading the literature to get the brain weight and the brain strength, the emotional strength, the spiritual strength, the self-esteem in order to lead as a man?
Yeah, great question. I think we really have to be aware of knowing where we are in terms of leadership as a man, right? Because some people think because I make a lot of money, I'm a leader. That's not true, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to be aware enough. How do I lead people? Okay, you can look at your past. Am I the person who takes action when it's time to take action? How do I impact those around me? those kind of things. And I tell people this all the time, who was I or who am I submitted to when it comes to a man? Because I believe true leadership is submitting yourself to another man's vision. And so you know how to serve. So when you get married, you know what it's like to serve and you know what it's like to lead. So if you are part of another man's vision and you submitted yourself to him faithfully, I think that's a great trait to have. But a lot of times our ladies don't ask those kind of questions. And so they might not know what leadership is. They just think that he's fine, he got some money and that's it. But there's so much more to the man opposed, like you say, to money, because emotional intelligence, right? Because there's more than one way to protect a person. You can protect them emotionally. You can protect them spiritually. I'm up at 3:45 in the morning. My family is asleep. I cover them in prayer. They knocked out. They have no idea. But that's a certain level of covering. So I just think, again, like I said before, I think a lot of men, man, we just not aware, and we don't have the people who's going to help hold us accountable and say, hey, J. Paul, this is where you might need to grow at.
And that spiritual and emotional maturity that you mentioned are things that we need as men to cover our women. Their needs are totally different from the traditional woman in modern times. And that's a great point, man. I'm glad you said that because that's something I don't think a lot of men understand. They still hold their securities within their pockets. And that's unfortunate.
And we, like you say, we in 2025. It's a different world. And women can make their own money, right? Most women have more money than these guys that they get into relationships with.
Yeah.
These women, they have a car, they have a car, they have a house, they have a 401k. They got all these things in place already. So when a lot of times when men is like, well, what you need me for? She needs you for your leadership. She needs you for your ministry. The problem with a lot of men, though, is we don't know our mission. Or we are afraid to do use the gift that God has put in us to impact the world. And not even so much impact the world, maybe impact your house, right? Change starts in the house, not in the White House, but just in your house. So
yeah,
a lot of men struggle with that.
Well, Shon, what are some tools or maybe some literature you can recommend to some brothers? Because I also know that you're also a 5-time author. What are some of the book titles that you've written to come up to help us as men to be better leaders?
Well, I will say this, because the 5 books that I did write previously, they were years ago in my marriage, because I was married 15 years before I divorced, right? So I don't really promote those books as much anymore. But I do have 2 ebooks that I have written. And one is on long distance relationship. It's called the Long Distance Toolkit. And because my wife and I, we met long distance. We met on Instagram.
Wow.
And we married 6 months later. So a lot of people are like, how did you marry a woman in 6 months? You met online and y'all going on 8 years of marriage now. And so the ebook is available. And then I also have another ebook called Another Chance at Love. And what does that look like after a failed relationship? So they're like journals. You can print them out and they have questions in there to ask you. So with Another Chance ebook, I tell people to, before you jump, I was telling a guy today, before you jump into another relationship, get the Another Chance ebook, because it's going to show you, it's a mirror to look at you and to see some areas that you need to change before you get into another relationship or another marriage. Those on my website at scaredtoremarry.com/products.
Ooh, Shon, you just said something right there, man. You just said something. See, now, you know what you just did, Shon? See, you just struck a nerve in a lot of people who believe that in order to get over the ex, you got to get under the next. Come on, man. God. Come on, bro.
Man. And it's strange. It's strange to think that people still think that in 2025, J. Paul.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah. It's sad, unfortunately, because I get that 20, 30 years ago when people, hey, I need to get into somebody else. I get it. But today's world that we live in, it's just not healthy, because you're going to have the comparison, right? Well, my ex used to do this, and like the comparison trap is never healthy. And you never really took the time to see what's wrong with you, right? Statistically, if we look at divorce rates, the second time around is 65%. And then third time divorces are 73%. So as you can see, the numbers climb after each divorce, right? So I think, and a lot of times people don't take accountability for their actions. They blame their ex. And so when I tell people who they're dating, if they spend a lot of time talking about their ex, just pay for the meal and tell them I'll like a picture or two on Instagram or later or something. I don't know.
Yeah, man, that's a serious conversation right there, because I tell this story all the time, and I've told you about it. I Years ago, I was traveling through Houston for work, and I heard on the radio show a lady called in and she asked the question, why is it that men call women back months later after she's moved on? And I called in, and my response was that love is a spirit, and love is something that the enemy spiritually has to combat. And once you break up with a woman, typically as men, and I'm sure the men viewing and listening can attest to this, typically that's when the party starts. That's when all the bald head scalawags come around, and it seems like it's a good old hold down. But it lasts for a small period of time. And then the party's over, Shon. And then you're sitting there alone. You're like, man, I miss Bae. Man, I miss Boo. Man, baby girl used to do this. These other girls don't do what my baby did. So now once the party's over, you call her. But at that time, she's pulled her heart away from you. So the love is no longer present. So what does the enemy have to combat? That's why the hold down is over. And so, man, I think that what you just said, I believe what you just said. I'm not going to say think. I believe what you just said is very key. When breaking up or when starting over, taking the proper time to heal, as opposed to attending a hold down or taking advantage of the scallywags that may come about, but really sitting with yourself and assessing yourself and taking accountability for what you did and saying, hey, let me use this time of separation to work on myself so that I can potentially go back to the good thing I had. Because I see a lot of people when they're married, they separate and they feel as though separation means I'm single again.
Mm-hmm.
I also hear the title that you're single until marriage, which I don't agree with, but I hear that in modern times. What do you have to say about that?
It's a loaded question, man. We can go so many places with that. I heard like maybe 3 or 4 different questions, but I do hear that, or I believe, and this is just my opinion, I believe you heal faster when you take accountable for your actions. Mm-hmm. Right. So if you go through a divorce and you're like, hey, this is where I screwed up, I was inconsiderate, I was ABCD, go down the list, and you actually are remorseful and you're like, I don't want to carry that stuff with me, I believe you can heal faster. You may be able to find somebody because you owned up to your mess, and now you can take this journey, not for the sake of trying to get with somebody else, but just so you can become a better you. Because I do believe we attract accordingly, right? Depending on our confidence level. So if I can own my mess and I can say I was selfish, then that's something I need to work on. How can I not be selfish, right? Maybe I need to join the ministry at my church. Maybe I need to give to the homeless. Like these kind of different things to make life, for you to realize that life is bigger than me. And so real quick, I know when I was, going through my divorce, one of my coworkers, and this years ago, my coworkers found out. They were like, oh, I heard one lady, she was like, there's a hotel room right around the corner from the house, from the job. I was like, damn, like, man, I mean, and they, man, I had access to so many women, but I didn't do it because I had a daughter. My daughter was 13, 14 at the time. And so I didn't want to be a bad example for her. And like you said, I didn't do the hold down, because if I was, I believe I would have missed out on the wife that I'm married to. Sleeping around, I would have messed around and missed out trying to feed the flesh. So I think we have to be a little mindful, and to think that, yeah, just because you're separated and going through a divorce doesn't mean you need to sleep around, because you're harming yourself even more.
Yeah, it deepens the damage. It does deepen the damage.
Yeah. Shoot, somebody might pop up pregnant.
Yeah. I've experienced quite a few brothers go through that. That's so true, man. And what you just said, you said something about the level of responsibility and knowing what to do during marriage and what you may have not known. And going back to me being a traditional Southern guy, I didn't prioritize my marriage. I didn't understand the difference of separating time and work. And I prioritized work and money over my family, and didn't know it, didn't recognize it. But once again, I went back to the providing side of my role as a man, as opposed to my spiritual side and my physical presence, which is something that wasn't taught and typically isn't taught, about prioritizing and putting your home first. Man, that's a real thing, man.
It is. And it's only, I want men to understand, because I struggled with that too on my first marriage. I struggled with that. My identity was so wrapped up in trying to make sure that I was providing. But now that I'm older, I realize too that provision is a part of you. It's not you. I had a well-known guy on my show a couple of weeks ago. He said the problem with most men is they think they are the big P providers, right? When God is our provider. Mm-hmm. We're little P providers. Our provision comes from him. And what does that look like? That looks like health and strength, right? Because health is wealth. Mm-hmm. If you're healthy, you can make it happen. So that's why when men lose their jobs and stuff like that, their identity was caught up in being big P providers when they're not big P providers. That's God. God gives us the strength to create. The Bible talks about, I don't want to get too preachy, but it says, I will give you the power to gain wealth. Right. So when our identities are wrapped up in as a provider, jobs, we lose jobs, bad business deals, child support, all these different things that can really throw our money off. So now all of a sudden you're not valuable now because your money low.
Man, and a lot of people tied that. They use that as a metric to even see if someone's worthy. Because you mentioned earlier that a lot of women are a lot more successful than men. And using money as a metric, I believe that's ungodly, me personally. And on one of your episodes, you spoke of that with one of your guests about doing things God's way. After the break, this is also a godly platform as well, although I know that my tongue says a few worldly words. You know what I mean? But my behavior is biblical. You know what I mean? Outside of the words I use. So let's speak to that, man. Let's speak to searching for a mate God's way, operating and moving God's way in regards to using sex as a tool, or money as a tool, or your occupation as a tool. So what does operating in God's way look like during dating and also in marriage?
Yeah, with dating, because a lot of times people use the whole courtship thing. I get it, but I'm just like, and that's a different topic. But I do think if you are dating somebody and you're trying to do this God's way, I do think, first of all, are they really believers? Like, because people be like, yeah, I'm a believer. I believe in God. That's cool. Man. But it's so broad, right? It's so broad. It's a broad spectrum. Statistics show that most people in the United States claim that they're Christian, but when you ask them about Christian beliefs, they couldn't give you their plan of salvation. So that should tell you something right there. And that's another topic for another time. But I do think if you are a born again believer and you are dating, I think there are some things that should fall in place. Like, is God number one in my life? What does that look like? Whether if that's I'm not having sex till I'm married, whether if I'm not living with you until we marry, like there has to be some biblical guidelines. And I know those are unpopular things in 2025, but should be some parameters in place when we are dating. So a lot of people, they just kind of do what they feel, and so they get the results that they got. But I do think if you honor someone and you respect them, and you are dating them to where you're like, me and you are going to be committed to, whether that's abstinence, whatever. But you should be able to know that they're Christian by the way that they carry themselves. How do you treat other people? Matter of fact, how do you treat people who can't do anything for you in return? Are you always in your feelings? Are you always caught up in drama? Those kind of different things. Again, is money your God? Those kind of different things. And I think we ought to take the time to ask the necessary questions that it takes for us to have to date successfully. And then when it comes to marriage, do we understand the Bible when it comes to, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church? Like, do we understand all those things? As husbands, are you sacrificial? As a wife, are you willing to submit to the goal? Are we raising our kids in a godly manner? Do we attend church regularly? Do we do outreach? All these different things. I mean, there's so many different things that we could do. Do we pray together? And that's a big struggle for a lot of men too. Because a lot of men say, I'll pray for you, but I won't pray with you. That's too scary. Because I don't sound like a pastor on Sunday when I pray. So that's huge too. My wife and I, we go to bed, we pray. You know what I'm saying? I ain't got to preach like, dear Lord Jesus. You know what I'm saying? It ain't got to be that deep. You just got to make sure that we connected. And women, J. Paul, the amount of women that I have encountered who said, I mean, these women are in their 30s and 40s, so they've had numerous relationships. I've never had a man pray for me, pray with me. Crazy. You had his baby and he never prayed with you? But that's another show for another time.
Well, it sounds like what you're speaking to are insecurities, and that's a topic that you had on your podcast with one of your guests, with a man on there specifically, and you guys were talking about insecurities. We have all types of insecurities, whether it be our height, our hair, our inability to pray a certain way, or to do some of the things that we believe that our woman may respect that she see within another man. Like you mentioned, you don't speak or pray like someone else that they may admire, or someone you both admire. The guy even mentioned his teeth at one point, you know what I'm saying, being crooked. I myself are one of those guys. I struggle with that. Like, hey man, I got crooked teeth, man. So we'll whop the bam. But I learned that, like you mentioned, about what's more important as far as your relationship with God. What's your integrity like? Who are you morally? Who are you as far as your goals, your vision for the relationship? Because those are 6 words, man, that I really wish that was instilled in me, and it's short-term goals and long-term goals. And I also understand that in relationships, sometimes those goals can be interrupted and your life can be reshifted. So how do we maneuver around that to compromise for the sake of love?
Ooh, great question. I think that boils down to how much do I really love this person, come hell or high water, whether if that's a physical ailment, right? Maybe one of us can't work. Maybe something happened. Maybe mama got sick. Now mama got to live with us. Now my in-law got to live with us. Blended families, like all these different things. Now I got to deal with a crazy baby daddy. He was cool at first, but now he nuts. You know what I'm saying? Now I got to, lay hands on him. And I ain't talking about spiritually.
Don't put the paws on him, Shon. Don't put the paws on him, Shon.
Paws on him. You know what I'm saying?
Don't put the paws on him. Put some Episcopal paws on him.
You know what I'm saying? These are different things, J. Paul, but this society that we live in, man, and I said this the other day, we live in this Amazon age, man, where we want our man delivered on our doorstep, complete, finished. Amazon man dropped, he dropped the Amazon package off. He dropped the man off, the Amazon truck gone. Got my man in 24 hours. It don't work like that. And very few of us, I believe, in this culture, very few of us are built to handle adversity. An old pastor friend of mine, he said, adversity is God's university. And so sometimes God will test us. We will go through things. Like Jesus said, in this world, you will have tribulation. And so that test is to test the very fabric of our marriage. Can we flow the ebbs and flow through marriage? Can we? And like I said, a lot of us, I don't think, are battle tested. Maybe we're individually battle tested.
Ooh, that's hard.
But I don't think we're battle tested together. I think a lot of people suck when it comes to being teammates because we live in a selfish culture. And so when the Bible talk about that two become a one, when the scripture talks about a triple fold cord isn't easily broken, that's God in the midst. So can we depend on him when mama gets sick? Because every time something happens in life, J. Paul, we change. My daddy's sick. Okay, now we used to have, my wife and I, we used to have sex 4 times a week. Now we're only having sex once a week because my daddy's sick. But very few people aren't willing to make that turn. Oh, she tripping, man. She talking about her daddy sick. We was having sex 4 times a week. Now, really? That's what we doing? So we have to be able to be battle tested. And I think when we see our parents go through stuff and see if they've been able to hang on, because I don't want nobody to take this out of context, because I know somebody can take this clip and they can run with it. But I'm like, people, those families, those, our ancestors, they went through stuff. Yeah, stuff happened. But they stayed together, though. I ain't saying it's okay. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that they were battle tested. And I ain't talking about just with cheating people. I know they're going to already say, I ain't staying with no cheater. He had a family around the corner. He has 6 kids. I ain't talking about all that. I'm just saying, financially, you lose jobs. Like I said before, kids, all these different things that happen. Shoot, kids, moms and dads are burying kids today.
Another thing you touched on your podcast is trauma and healing. The way we view those scenarios, because we may have witnessed it with an immature mind and also without understanding of why. And so we go into relationships and we carry those relationships that we witness, not what we experience personally, but what we witness. And it sows a seed of fear in us to move forward or even to fight, even the know-how, the will, and the want to fight.
Yeah, for sure, man. Unaddressed trauma, and I know that's a buzzword today. We trauma.
Yeah,
I get it. Yeah. But very few people are aware of those triggers. Or I won't say they're not aware. They're not willing to do the necessary work to fix that, right? So I'll use me as an example. I remember I was in therapy. My therapist, he said, Shon, you got mommy issues. And I was like, who, me? He was like, yeah, because boom, 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 boom. Yeah, because from what you're telling me, he lined up everything. I mean, he lined everything. I said, man, but here it is. I can see where I sucked as a husband because I had mommy issues, right? So these things can tear apart our marriages if we aren't aware and not willing to do the work. So if we become emotionally regulated, we can create change, right? We can learn how to treat our spouses better. I tell people marriage is a mirror. Your spouse just holding up a mirror like this saying, look at you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, we have to be aware and we have to be willing to do the necessary work. What does that work look like? Because we hear that a lot. That looks like therapy. That looks like journaling. That looks like being an example. Right. I gave the example of, I remember my wife and I, we used to have our phones in our room and stuff like that. And one day I was like, you know what? I need to put my phone in the other room. If somebody die, I won't find out till tomorrow. Right. So I'm putting my phone in a different room.
Mhm.
Some months later, my wife was like, because we would be in the bed and she'd be on her phone or whatever, and she was like, came to me recently like, "Hey, babe, you know what? I'm gonna get a digital alarm clock like you. I'm gonna take my phone out the room too." Did I force her to change? No. I just became the example. And some people don't want to be the example. You change starts with me, J. Paul. It doesn't start with my spouse. It starts with me.
Mhm. And that's something that I also face as a man as well in my marriage, and but I'm grateful that, to your point, like you said, the mirror was placed in my face. And what worked for me was literature. Like you mentioned, it starts with you. What I've witnessed is that for some men it makes them feel weak to speak vulnerably and to speak emotionally. But it is an emotional journey as well as spiritual. You have to know what you need from your partner in order to not step out to gain it from the world. And me, myself, I turned to drinking. So, man, I was at the bar having great conversations with people. They gave me the ear I wish I had, but they didn't have an understanding of who I actually was and what I wasn't doing to hold me accountable. And so I felt good in that. And I got that comfort from the world, but it made my relationship worse at home because I was too emotionally immature to be able to express what I needed and what I wasn't getting because I expected it simply because I was a man.
I do believe that's where the accountability comes in. Having somebody else, it could be a family member. I mean, like for me, like my brother and I, we are super close,
Mm.
and so on the strength, like I fear the Lord, but at the same time, I fear my brother too, right?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like if I do something out of line, I'm like I know I'm gonna get it, and here I am, a grown man, but at the
Mm.
same time, that's that accountability that other men have in my life. I have another good friend in Houston. That's my homeboy. I can't be out here just willy nilly. You know what I'm saying? Because he's gonna be like, "Hey, Sean, you already know."
Damn it.
So to have the fear of the Lord is good, but I do believe God will put people in your life as well, um, because you have to know that the results are going to be the same. A lot of times, people think that they're anomalies, right? They think they're above reproach, like, oh, it won't happen to me. Is that right? Okay, it's not going to happen to you. So a lot of times, people think that they can cheat and get away with it, but it will come back.
Yeah.
That's just the way things go. That's just the way it is. But to have that awareness, you got to know whether, like I say, if that's through therapy, that can be through reading books. You got to be aware. You got to have some self reflection, because as long as you're always in your phone, you never really have time to think about who you are. You got to have some self reflection, and that can be just that could be sitting in your garage, just having a glass of lemonade, just looking outside. Like, allow yourself to feel, allow yourself to, because that inner voice, it'll speak to you, but a lot of people will ignore it. And if you have a spouse who's and I'm throwing on my air quotes, a safe space, I think it makes the conversations a little more easier to have, because it's like, we talk, "Hey babe, what's going on? We need to talk," and I'm not looking at you sideways, or I'm not judging you. So if you have that kind of history, it's going to be tough to have those conversations. But if you do have someone who is willing to hear, I think if you use vulnerable words, that emotions wheel where they have all the different words. I feel I'm not just sad or I'm hurt, but
Yeah.
be like, "Hey babe, like, can I talk to you about something real quick?" Or just be like, "Oh, I had something been on my heart lately, and I want to just share this with you." And like, we had that talk last week about such and such. During that time, I felt alone, or I felt abandoned. When you start using those kind of words, the conversation shifts. If your spouse is mature enough, they hear you with a different ear. You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
opposed to just like, "Oh, I was pissed off yesterday," or "I was mad," or it's like, those words are so common. But when you use like, "I was sad," or "I was alone," "I felt alone," though it makes the conversations deeper. And sometimes you have to start with vulnerability in order for people to hear where you're coming from.
Those are great tools, Sean, and that's some great advice. I really appreciate that. Before we get out of here, let's speak to the modern ways of dating. The things that people tend to value today when choosing a partner. What I notice is people look at, for you mentioned earlier, the physical attributes within a person, their physical components that we look for. I want a woman that looks like this, or I want a man that's, well, we hear from women 6'2", chocolate with a beard. I mean, you got that down packed. You got the chocolate and the beard, man. So I see why you married. You know, I was just, I was just,
I'm not
I
six
see why
two
you.
though. I'm
No,
not 6'2".
but
I
you
don't.
chocolate got the beard, man. You you got it. You got two of the three. Yeah, you're a winner. You know what
I'll take it.
I mean? So what? So what are some things, man, that we really should be looking for in a partner? We mentioned some key things earlier about spirituality, relationships with God, healing, getting over past trauma, our things that we may have lacked of seeing in order to get to a place to where we can play our positions properly. So, what are some things that we should be looking for while dating in order to get to the place of marriage?
Great question. Great question. Well, of course, the physical is always important. I mean, you plan on spending your rest of your life with this person. I mean, you you want to wake up to somebody you're physically satisfied with.
Yeah.
Even though you might not be able to have it all, but you can have most. If you are a believer, what is their personal relationship with the Lord? We talked about that. Uh, are they accountable? Can they take accountability for their actions? Uh, can they apologize? Those kind of things. I think they're huge, and you can find those things out in the dating process. You will find that out because you will hit a bump in the road and see how they manage that. How do they manage conflict? I think that's important too. Are they the type that kind of fly off the handle, or they have enough self awareness to be like, oh, this is an area I need to work on. We talked about that too. And then here's another important one that we often overlook is how are they with money? I
Mm.
think that's huge because there will be financial decisions that got to be made. Can we coexist together financially? Just because you make more money than me don't mean you should run the money, right? Because I know people who they're broke 6-figure earners.
Oh
They
yeah.
just they oh, I make money. I'm gonna keep the money going. Yeah, but what happened when the well runs dry?
Mm.
So I think those are very important. And then how are they with other people? How are they with their family and their friends? I think
Yeah.
those are important things too. And I always say this too: how are they to people who can't do anything for them in return? One of the reasons I married my wife was because she valued she have a heart for homeless people, like
Mm.
people who can't do anything for her. She will give anything to try to make sure them people are good, to make sure that they're good. And I always thought that was a great trait to have, because I'm like, if I'm giving you 110%, I don't even imagine what you're going to do for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, but those are some of the things, man, that I think. And again, it all goes according to your value system. A lot of those are mines, but it just depends on what you value. And if you know those things, stick to them. But they might not have all of them. But I always say, if they got 80%, take the 80. Don't
Mhm.
don't 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 leave the 80 or shelf the 80 trying to get the 100, because the 100 isn't attainable. Because if they were 100, they wouldn't want you. So
That's cold. That's cold, Sean. That's cold. That's cold. But hey, man, if you're 80% out there, sounds like you got a lot of hope. You know what I mean? So hey, man. So Sean, man, I really appreciate this conversation, man. Hopefully, we can do a part two in the future because statistics show percentages of divorcees, percentages of single individuals, and also the ratio of the dating pool amongst men and women. And this isn't a racially biased conversation because it appears that all of humanity is suffering from this. We even see this from the passport bros. They go abroad. I have friends of mine that go abroad and they meet these beautiful women, but they're still single. And so it's not exclusive to the states. And so I tell people all the time, this issue is bigger than America. Those moral values and integrity, those are things to look out for. And as well as those character traits that you mentioned, that's something that I myself look at in a woman. Like, how do you treat people in public that can't give you anything in return? How you manage money is another thing that I look at. Those two things are very major to me. I have a thing that I do with women that I've dated, and I say, hey, okay, because I do think out 3 months at a time. I think quarterly, right? And so I say, okay, if we were to save money together, you know what I'm saying? At the end of each quarter, the first quarter, what would you like to do with the money? If they say take a trip, or something like that, you're done. You're done. Because I can tell that your long-term vision doesn't line up with mine. And I asked a question with you, man. So I appreciate you affirming and confirming the fact that OJ Paul is thinking with the right frame of mind. Thank you, brother Shon. I appreciate that, man. He said, no, I'm on the right track. You know what I mean? I'm on the right track, Shon. Thank you, man. Hey, at least I know I'm not tripping, because I'm a petty picker, man. You know what I mean? I'm petty. Because here's something I looked at, right? I had an ex of mine, man, a high school sweetheart. She gonna know who she is if she see this. She had a few children, right? And she had a mini SUV. And she finished school, kudos to her, but she wanted a Camaro. And she had 3 kids, and she got the Camaro. And I said, yeah, I can't deal with you. You selfish. You know, you still selfish. You know what I mean? So is that petty? Or is that an honest metric to use when weeding people out?
No, that's real though. Yeah, you get a Camaro with 3 kids.
Oh yeah, nah. The legs getting too long for that, man. They almost taller than you. You know, like what? Like, wait a minute, this is selfish.
That's good. That's a great metric though. Shout out to you.
I appreciate it, Shon. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Salute to you, man. Amen.
Sure, salute, man. Thanks again for the opportunity, man.
Yeah, man. So, Shon, before we get out of here, man, can you tell the people how to support the Scary to Remarry podcast and where to find you on all DSPs?
You can go to scarytoremarry.com. All my content, products, and stuff, everything is there. But to support the podcast, just go to Apple Podcast. Shout out to all my Apple users. Leave a rating and review. Just search Scary to Remarry. Leave a rating and review. I want an honest review. If you don't think it's 5, that's cool. Leave a honest rating and review. And that's worth more than gold itself. So I'm not even asking you really even purchase anything. Just leave an honest rating and review, and that will help me from there.
And there it is. For those that may be out there who may have been married before, like myself, who may be a bit hesitant on doing so, fearful, or still suffering from the pain of disappointment, or if you may be still insecure about some of the decisions you made during the process, I want to encourage you all to understand that, like my shirt says, you are enough. Know that you are enough, and that healing is taking place in your life. And though you may be where you are emotionally, you can get through it, and you will. And I hope that your healing process and the steps you take, given the information provided by the good brother Shon here, that you take some of those steps. Check out some of his literature and check out his podcast, and prayerfully some of the things you hear will help you heal. So, good brother Shon, I thank you so much, and I want to tell you, man, I appreciate you, man, and your courage to love, because to love, it takes a lot of courage, man. So, man, I really respect you for that, man, and much respect and salute to you, man, for your mindset and the work that you're doing in the community to heal men and women alike, to get to the place of covenant, man. So God bless you, good brother.
Hey, thanks again, man. I see you in these fan base streets again, but thanks again.
Absolutely, man. So to the world out there, and to Shon, may the Most High God continue to bless you in every good and godly way. Until next time, respect and salute. We gone.